You know, I still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, replaying the moment I almost gave up, almost let them win. My parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, decided that my older brother deserved a life of luxury while I was left with a derelict cabin and a mountain of debt. But what if I told you that in that crumbling mess, I found something that completely flipped the script? Something that wasn't just money, but a secret, a legacy, that my parents desperately tried to keep buried. Was I wrong for exposing their true colors, for claiming what was rightfully mine after years of being treated like a second-class citizen? Tell me if you would have done the same thing. It all started, as most family sagas do, with a seemingly innocuous conversation, or rather, a series of subtle slights that built up over years. My brother, Mark, was always the golden child. He excelled in school, effortlessly charming everyone, and seemed to have a Midas touch when it came to business. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, artistic one, more interested in sketching in my notebook than chasing academic accolades or corporate ladders. My parents, bless their hearts, never explicitly said they favored him, but their actions screamed it from the rooftops. Christmas gifts for Mark were always the latest tech gadgets or expensive trips, while I'd get a new sketchbook and pencils. My achievements, like getting into a good art school, were met with a polite nod, quickly overshadowed by Mark's latest promotion or lucrative deal. I always just accepted it, telling myself that siblings are different, and parents show love in different ways. I truly believed, deep down, that when it came to the crunch they would be fair. Oh, how wrong I was. The real gut punch came a few years ago when my grandmother, my mother's mother, passed away. She was the one who truly saw me, encouraged my art, and always had a kind word. Her passing left a void, but also a glimmer of hope, because I knew she had a small but significant estate. I remember my parents, looking unusually grave, telling Mark and me that Grandma had left everything to them, to manage as they saw fit. It felt a little off, but I trusted them. What fool I was. Fast forward to about a year ago, when my parents called us both for a family meeting. They had just sold their massive, perfectly manicured suburban home, claiming they wanted to downsize and travel. Mark arrived in his brand new Mercedes, wearing a tailored suit, looking every inch the successful entrepreneur. I drove my beat-up Civic, feeling a familiar pang of inadequacy. We sat in the living room, a room I had so many memories in, now echoing with a strange finality. My dad, clearing his throat, started the announcement. "Son," he said, turning to Mark, "your mother and I have decided to set you up properly. You've worked hard, and you deserve it." He then handed Mark a set of keys and a legal document. Mark's eyes widened as he read it. It was the deed to a stunning brand new mansion in the most exclusive part of town, accompanied by a trust fund worth a cool $800,000. My jaw practically hit the floor. My parents beamed at Mark, who was trying and failing to suppress a triumphant grin. Then my dad turned to me, his expression softening, but with a hint of what I now recognize as pity. "And as for you, your name," he began, "we know you've always loved the outdoors, and that old cabin we inherited from your great-grandfather on the lake. It needs a lot of work, but it's yours now. It's got good bones, and it's a place where you can really find your creative spirit." He handed me a single, rusty key and a folder. Inside was the deed to a dilapidated, crumbling cabin, nestled deep in the woods, along with a stack of unpaid property tax bills stretching back years and a notice from the county about significant structural issues that needed addressing immediately. The cabin wasn't just needing work. It was a money pit, a liability, a literal broken dream disguised as a gift. The contrast was stark, brutal. Mark got a mansion and a fortune. I got a fixer-upper that was barely standing and a mountain of debt. My mind reeled. I looked at my parents, searching for an explanation, for a hint of irony, anything but the genuine smiles they offered me. "Don't look so glum, son," my mom said. "It's a wonderful opportunity for you to create your own sanctuary." My sanctuary felt more like a prison sentence. I left that meeting in a daze, the rusty key heavy in my hand. Mark, ever the gracious victor, patted me on the back and offered to buy me a celebratory drink. I politely declined, my voice thick with unshed tears. The drive to the cabin was long, filled with a growing sense of betrayal. The road, as it turned out, was barely paved, winding through dense forest, a metaphor for my life at that moment. When I finally arrived, the cabin was even worse than I imagined. Peeling paint, broken windows, a porch that looked one step away from collapsing, and an overwhelming smell of damp and decay. It was less a sanctuary and more a horror movie set. I remember sitting on the broken steps, watching the sun set over the stagnant lake, feeling utterly, completely defeated. My parents had not just favored Mark. They had actively sabotaged my future, burdened me with this mess while setting him up for life. The next few weeks were a blur of anger, despair, and a desperate attempt to assess the damage. I called contractors, only to be met with exorbitant quotes that far exceeded my meager savings. The cabin was beyond fixer-upper. It needed to be practically rebuilt. I felt trapped, a pawn in my parents' twisted game of favoritism. The idea of selling it crossed my mind, but even that seemed impossible. Who would buy this? And then, a glimmer of hope, or rather, a nagging thought. My great-grandfather. I vaguely remembered stories about him being an eccentric inventor, a recluse who spent his days tinkering. My parents had always dismissed him as odd, and never encouraged questions about him. They'd even subtly discouraged me from visiting the cabin when he was alive, claiming he preferred his solitude. It felt strange, considering it was now mine. One particularly frustrating afternoon, after a contractor had just given me another depressing assessment, I decided to tackle the one room that seemed less structurally compromised. The small study. It was filled with dusty books, strange contraptions, and what looked like my great-grandfather's old workbench. As I cleared away cobwebs and old newspapers, I noticed something odd about the fireplace. It was a sturdy, stone structure, but one of the stones seemed slightly out of place, almost loose. Curiosity, a feeling I hadn't felt in weeks, spurred me on. I pushed on the stone, and to my surprise, it gave way slightly. Behind it, not a vast treasure chamber, but a small, dusty alcove. Inside, nestled amongst some old tools and a faded photograph of my great-grandfather, was a heavy, leather-bound journal and a tarnished wooden box. My heart started to beat a little faster. The journal was meticulous, filled with my great-grandfather's elegant, if slightly shaky, handwriting. It wasn't a diary in the traditional sense, but more of a logbook of his experiments and observations. He wrote about his life, his dreams, his frustrations with the modern world, and his passion for something he called sustainable energy solutions. What truly caught my eye were the detailed sketches and complex diagrams scattered throughout the pages. They looked like blueprints for some kind of device. The wooden box contained a few trinkets, a compass, some foreign coins, and a small, intricately carved wooden bird. But beneath all of it, wrapped in a piece of velvet, was a single, sparkling diamond. It wasn't just any diamond, it was huge, perfectly cut, and pulsed with an inner light. It looked like it belonged in a museum, not hidden in a dusty box. My initial thought was that it was a family heirloom, but the sheer size and quality of it made me question everything. I spent the next few days devouring the journal. My great-grandfather wasn't just an eccentric. He was a genius, far ahead of his time. He wrote about developing a revolutionary method for generating clean energy, a technology that could power homes and even small towns with minimal environmental impact. He had been close to a breakthrough, constantly refining his designs, but there was a recurring theme in his later entries: fear. He wrote about being approached by powerful corporations, about threats, about being warned to cease his research. He mentioned a patent, but also a suppression. He had been trying to protect his invention from being stolen and exploited. Then came the bombshell. In one of the final entries, scrawled hastily, he wrote about securing a patent, not just for his energy device, but for a unique, incredibly valuable diamond. He had discovered a new method of synthesizing diamonds, a way to create them that was purer, larger, and more valuable than anything found in nature. He had created that diamond, the one in the box, as proof of his success and as a failsafe. He intended for it to be sold, the proceeds funding his energy research and securing his legacy. The journal explicitly stated that this diamond and the rights to his energy technology were to go to his direct descendants who shared his vision and were not swayed by corporate greed. He specifically mentioned wanting someone who would use his inventions for the good of humanity, not just for profit. The most chilling part, he wrote about entrusting his legacy to his daughter, my grandmother, and how she would know what to do. He even hinted that others, particularly his son-in-law, my father, might try to interfere or claim it for themselves, as they were too conventional and beholden to the system. It was a direct warning about my own parents. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. My grandmother, who truly understood me. Her will, where everything supposedly went to my parents. The strange way my parents handled her estate. And now, this cabin, this diamond, and the secret of my great-grandfather's inventions. The diamond in the box, I quickly learned, was not just valuable. It was estimated to be worth around $50 million, a prototype of a new class of synthetic diamonds. The patent for my great-grandfather's energy technology, buried within the journal's details, was even more staggering. It had the potential to revolutionize the world. My great-grandfather had been a genius, and my parents had been sitting on his legacy, actively suppressing it, for decades. They hadn't just disinherited me, they had stolen my birthright, my grandmother's inheritance, and my great-grandfather's dream. The cabin wasn't just a dilapidated dump, it was a vault, a hidden trust, meant for me all along. The very gift they gave me was the key to unlocking their deception. I sat there, the journal and the diamond spread out before me, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside. Betrayal, anger, but also a surge of exhilaration. This wasn't just about money, it was about justice. This was about finally understanding why I had always felt like an outsider, why my creativity was subtly stifled, why Mark was always the favored one. They saw my great-grandfather's eccentricity in me, and they feared it. They feared I would uncover the truth. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, holding undeniable proof of my parents' deception, sitting on a fortune they had tried to keep from me, a fortune that was technically mine by blood and intent. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted them, exposed them, or tried to make a deal? What would your first move have been? I spent several agonizing days weighing my options. The initial urge was to burst into my parents' new, downsized condo, diamond in hand, and scream gotcha. But I knew that wouldn't be productive. I needed a plan. I needed leverage. My first step was to discreetly, and I mean discreetly consult a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one specializing in intellectual property and estate law. I fabricated a story about finding old family documents, omitting the diamond and the full extent of my parents' involvement. The lawyer, a shrewd but empathetic woman named Sarah, was fascinated by the patent information I provided. She confirmed its validity and its immense potential. She also looked into my grandmother's will, and there it was, glaringly obvious, a clause stating that in the event of my grandmother's passing, her estate, including all inherited properties and intellectual assets, was to be divided equally between my mother and her two children, Mark and myself. The catch: my mother was designated as the executor, with the power to manage and distribute the assets as she saw fit, ostensibly to avoid disputes. My parents had used this clause to their advantage, giving Mark the mansion and the trust, while quietly passing the debt-ridden cabin to me, knowing full well the treasure it contained, or at least, knowing the potential of the great-grandfather's legacy. They hadn't technically broken the law in distributing my grandmother's estate, but they had certainly acted unethically, if not fraudulently, regarding my great-grandfather's explicit wishes for his legacy, and effectively defrauded me of my rightful inheritance by obscuring the true value of what they gave me. With Sarah's guidance, I began to build my case. We authenticated the diamond, which, as suspected, was a marvel of science and worth every bit of that $50 million. The patent for the energy technology was even more valuable, potentially billions. The next step was the confrontation. I invited my parents and Mark to the cabin. The irony was not lost on me. They arrived, looking slightly bewildered by the desolate surroundings. Mark, ever the businessman, immediately started pointing out all the structural flaws, probably mentally calculating how little it would sell for. My parents looked around with a smug, almost pitying expression, clearly thinking they had pulled off the perfect deception. I had set up a small table in the relatively stable study, the journal and the diamond box carefully placed. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I wanted to show you what I found." I opened the journal, turning to the entries about the diamond and the energy patent, and then to the one specifically naming my grandmother and warning about conventional mines. I then opened the wooden box and revealed the magnificent diamond. The silence in the room was deafening. My mother's face went white, then crimson. My father's jaw dropped, his eyes fixated on the sparkling gem. Mark, for the first time in his life, looked utterly speechless, his usual composure completely shattered. "This," I said, picking up the diamond, "is worth $50 million. It's a prototype of a new class of synthetic diamonds, patented by my great-grandfather, and this journal contains the blueprints and patent information for a clean energy technology that could change the world." I paused, letting it sink in. My great-grandfather intended for this legacy to go to a descendant who would use it for good, not for profit, and explicitly warned against those who were beholden to the system. He entrusted it to Grandma, who, in her will, intended it to be divided equally among her children and grandchildren. Instead, you gave Mark a mansion and a trust, and me this broken cabin, hoping I'd never find the true inheritance hidden within. My father stammered, "We didn't know about the diamond, son. We thought the cabin was just an old family relic, a sentimental gesture." My mother, however, was less diplomatic. We knew about the energy research. She snapped, "But your great-grandfather was a dreamer. It was too risky, too big. We thought it was best to keep it quiet, for the family's protection." Her eyes flickered to Mark, then back to me, a desperate plea for me to believe their flimsy excuse. "And the diamond?" I pressed. "Did you not know about the diamond that's explicitly mentioned in the journal, and how the proceeds were to fund the very research you protected the family from?" They had no answer. Mark, surprisingly, was the first to speak, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "You mean, all this time, you guys knew about this?" His golden boy facade had completely crumbled. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at them, realizing he had been used as a pawn in their scheme as well, a distraction from the real prize. The confrontation was brutal. My parents eventually confessed, not fully, but enough. They admitted they knew about the energy patent, though they downplayed its significance. They claimed they thought the diamond was just a pretty stone, and hadn't realized its true worth. A blatant lie, given the journal's explicit details. They had deliberately suppressed my great-grandfather's legacy, fearing the implications, perhaps even hoping to eventually claim it for themselves, or for Mark. They saw my artistic, unconventional nature as a liability, not an asset, and certainly not as the key to unlocking the family's true inheritance. With Sarah's help, we negotiated. I didn't want to destroy my family completely, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it either. The outcome, I retained full ownership of the diamond and the energy patent. I immediately began working with Sarah to establish a foundation dedicated to developing and implementing my great-grandfather's clean energy technology, ensuring his vision for humanity would be realized. My parents were forced to transfer a significant portion of the $800,000 trust they gave Mark to a separate fund for me, as compensation for the years of emotional distress and the financial burden of the cabin. Mark, seeing the injustice and the sheer scale of his parents' deception, actually stood by me. He was genuinely shocked and felt betrayed himself. He even offered to help with the foundation, seeing a chance to redeem his family's name and do something truly meaningful. The cabin, once a symbol of my despair, is now being meticulously restored, not as a personal residence, but as a research and development center for the energy project, a place where my great-grandfather's legacy can finally flourish. My relationship with my parents is, to say the least, strained. They tried to apologize, but it felt hollow, tinged with regret for being caught, not for their actions. I still love them, in a way, but the trust is shattered, perhaps irrevocably. Mark and I, however, have grown closer than ever. We're united by this shared history, and by our shared mission to bring our great-grandfather's vision to life. It's a bittersweet victory. I gained a fortune, a purpose, and a renewed sense of self-worth. But I lost the idealized version of my parents, the ones I thought were fair and loving. The broken cabin, however, ended up being the greatest gift of all. It was the key to my freedom, my inheritance, and my true calling. So, that's my story. From being disinherited with a broken cabin to finding a $50 million diamond and a world-changing invention. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected and seemingly worthless places. And that sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the most. But it's also a testament to resilience and to the power of truth. Like this video, if you were on my side and think I did the right thing. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did my parents deserve what they got? Would you have been as forgiving? I'll see you all in the next story.